Namaste and good evening. I, Mahima Kapoor, researcher and assistant editor at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, welcome you all to the IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Within the umbrella term of gender-based violence, domestic violence has been a prevalent issue with far-reaching consequences. The mounting evidence of increased incidents due to the pandemic-induced lockdowns, with women trapped with their perpetrators, needs to be addressed. But even this unusual spot is only the tip of the iceberg. With that in mind, today we have gathered for a special talk under the series, The State of Gender Equality, #Gender Gaps, with Dr. Shalu Nigam on implementing domestic violence law in India. Are we asking the right questions? This deliberation is being organized by the IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center. I feel honored to introduce the chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel.
Hello. Namaste. Namaste.
Ma'am is the visiting professor at IMPRI, New Delhi, and former professor, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
With the permission of the chair, I would like to introduce the speaker and discussants for the session.
Yes, Mahima, please introduce the discussants, the speaker and discussants. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. I feel privileged to introduce the speaker, Dr. Shalu Nigam. Ma'am is an advocate, author, and researcher of gender and human rights. Welcome, ma'am. We are fortunate to have Professor Kanchan Mathur, Ms. Gayatri Sharma, Ms. Anchita Ghatak, and Professor Vishav Raksha as the discussants. Professor Kanchan Mathur is the Professor Honorary, Institute of Development Studies, Jaipur. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Gayatri Sharma is a lawyer and Program Director, Women Power Connect, New Delhi. Welcome, ma'am. Ms. Anchita Ghatak is the co-founder, Parichiti, Making Women Visible in Kolkata. Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening. And Professor Vishav Raksha is the head, Department of Sociology and Director, Center for Women's Studies, University of Jammu. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I invite Professor Vibhuti Patel to take the proceedings further, and we look forward to learning from our esteemed gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arjun Kumar and Ms. Mahima Kapoor, for this opportunity to discuss a very important concern for women of India today. I greet the speaker, Dr. Shalu Nigam, and esteemed discussants, Professor Kanchan Mathur, Advocate Gayatri Sharma, Madam Anchita Ghatak, and Professor Vishav Raksha. According to recently released data by the government's National Crime Records Bureau, NCRB, 22,372 housewives took their own lives last year. That is an average of 61 suicides every day, or one suicide of housewife every 25 minutes. Housewives accounted for nearly 15% of total 153,000 odd recorded suicides in India in the year 2020, and more than 50% of total number of women who killed themselves. NFH's data on domestic violence are equally unnerving. Several women's organizations have been working with the battered women. Narrating their experiences with battered women, they realize that the pattern of violence differs from one class to another. At the Basti level, there is nothing private in the husband beating his wife, or half of the neighborhood is witness to the act. Sympathies for the wife are according to the rules already established. If the husband is an alcoholic or drug addict or a womanizer, there is always a lot of sympathy for wife, and the neighbor often reach out and help the wife by stopping her husband. But if they perceive husband as a decent sort of man with no major vices, blame is usually laid on wife, basically because wife beating is considered legitimate, as it has shown in the recent NFHS 5 results. In the upper and middle classes, where privatization of both emotions and acts of domestic violence is given a high premium, the situation is very different. Very often, no one else, even in the house, knows what is happening. First time when a wife confides into her friend or relative, it is received with stunned silence and disbelief, accompanied with usual set of questions. And I quote, but he's so educated, so well employed, not excessive in his habits, so respectable. One leveling point between all these classes, if a husband is not an alcoholic or womanizer or has no other social vice, is the attitude that wife must have provoked the husband and it could not have been all his fault, which is, in other words, is the overall acceptance of physical violence towards wife. Experiences of women's organization providing institutional support to the survivors of domestic violence are, number one, an odd slap or a kick or now and then was not even perceived as something major. Number two, connection between the above and a regular physical assault was not perceived. And number three, a lot of women who suffered physical abuse were willing to continue to suffer provided he would change his other habits such as drug addiction, gambling, alcoholism, womanizing. And four, no woman perceived it as an act which was to be condemned unequivocally. All women who could talk about being beaten felt more humiliated by this act than any other form of subjugation, and which finally broke down their resistance. It became most painful aspect of their lives to talk about. Yet, because they were convinced that this form of chastisement was natural for a man to use, it had to be accepted because our tradition also says that Dhol Gamar Shudra Pashunari Yeshap Tadan Ke Adhikari, a drum, animal, and wife and a woman can be beaten up. After 40 years of collective efforts of women's rights movement, we got this law, Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. How effective this law has been? What has been the experiences of over last 16 years with women survivors of domestic violence who have filed cases under this law? Why are we not able to reduce numbers and intensity of domestic violence? To answer this mind-boggling question, IMPRI has organized this special lecture by Dr. Shalu Nigam and the discussion by the experienced experts. First of all, I request Dr. Shalu Nigam to make her presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Patel, and namaskar and greeting to all of you. First, Dr. Kumar and the whole team of organizers for providing this platform. I would also like to thank Professor Vibhuti Patel for agreeing to chair this session and the expert list of panelists. So I'm just keeping my finger crossed that, they're so experienced, so I really may make some mistakes. So please pardon me. Now, thank you, Professor Patel, for giving such a nice a background. So I'll start with the BPT. Can you see that?
No. Now, yes, we can see.
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, so the topic of today's discussion is implementation of domestic violence law in India. Are we asking the right questions? So, so there is some problem, sorry.
And bottom left, there you'll find a cursor. Bottom left, yeah. Yeah,
so yes, thanks. So this presentation is divided into 4 parts. So first part, I'll talking about domestic violence definition and concepts and cost and impact of abuse on women and children. Part 2 is about action taken at global level and in India. Part 3 is about impediments in accessing justice. And in part 4, we will talk about way forward. So domestic violence, I would like to say I do not consider it as a matrimonial dispute, because dispute generally implies that you're trivializing the violence. It takes place when two parties are at par with each other, where power dynamics do not operate. So for instance, dispute may take place between two neighbors who may try to park their vehicle at the same place, or between two companies who may refer their case to an arbitrator for same design or logo. So international organizations such as WHO and United Nations, they have defined domestic violence as a pattern of relationship that is used to gain or maintain power or control over an intimate partner. Other scholars have defined domestic violence in terms of structural violence or coercive use of power or any act of gender-based violence. Now, United Nations define violence against women as any act of gender-based violence that results in or may result in physical, sexual, or mental harm or suffering to women. So it is a global issue, but it is least understood. According to WHO, worldwide, 1 in every 3 women is being beaten or abused in some other way. It permeates beyond the boundaries of class, caste, religion, and other variables. The other scholars who have defined, they have seen violence, domestic violence as the most dangerous situation for a woman. And some scholars see it as a patriarchal terrorism. So a home is considered to be a kind of man's castle, and as a chattel, a wife belongs to her husband. So John Stuart Mill in 1869, in his thesis on subjection of women, he wrote that marriage is a form of slavery that confers power to men, and not only to good men or decently respectable men, but to all men, including the most brutal and most criminal, who are benefited by it. In India, despite the existence of matrix of legal and constitutional rights, equality and justice, the public and private divide exist. The constitutional values are not only applied in so-called private domain of the family. In fact, Delhi High Court in Harvinder Kaur versus Harminder Singh has said that implementing the constitutional provision within the family is like introducing a bull in a china shop. So the situation of domestic violence today is that almost one bride is being burned or murdered, and almost 2 are compelled to commit suicide every day. More than 14 cases of violence are registered every hour across the country under Section 498A. So this is, as you see, I have tried to pull out the data from National Crime Record Bureau reports. So you can see that the number of cases of violence are increasing every year, and also Section 304B and Dowry Prohibition Act. So this cases are increasing, and as you see, that conviction rate is consistently going down. So in 2006, conviction rate was 21.9, and in 2016, it came to 9.5. And in 2019, again, it is 14.6. And it's not only for Section 498A, but even for dowry abuse and or Dowry Prohibition Act also, the conviction rate is very less. So this is how some of the serious cases of domestic violence are reported by the media. There are many more which never grabs attention. However, I see these cases worse than as custodial torture or rape situation, because even there one has a hope, but and one can find an escape and refuge at home. But when one is at home and one faces violence, so then one may lose that hope also. Suicide rates, as Professor Patel has already elaborated that. So this is the data on different kind of research which is being conducted on suicide. So I'll not go into detail right now, but on an average, nearly 2.5 to 3 times women, attempt suicide as compared to men. Fire-related deaths among women, again, the situation shows that ratio is 18 times more among Indian women as compared to Pakistan, and 38 times more than in China. So NCRB report 2015 stated that 17,700 Indians died due to fire accident, of which 10,920 something are women. So this ratio is 3 times higher than that of men. So there are several medico-legal studies which shows that young brides and their joint or extended families were murdered by burning. Many were doused with kerosene and set alight. Majority sustained 70 to 80% burns. Most victims died immediately or within 24 hours. Murder occurred within the initial year of marriage. And most of these incidents took place in the marital home. In many cases, investigation is not being done properly. During the lockdown also, we have seen how domestic violence cases have increased. So once we say that, stay home, stay safe. So I really need to ask this question, that are homes really safe for women and girls? The National Family Health Survey data 3, 4, and 5 all talks about increase in violence. And the important thing is that many men and women believe that it is, they justify that, as Professor Patel was also talking about, that, it is that, men can beat their wives. So here I'm flagging this issue that, when there is any National Family Health Survey data, then we have NCRB data on suicide and fire-related deaths among housewives. So how the policymakers and especially the law enforcers are addressing the situation. Because several reports, if you see from the Law Commission or the decisions by the Supreme Court or High Courts, or by Malimat Committee report, and several other reports, you will find that they are talking about dilution of the law. They are saying that 498A should be diluted, should be made compoundable, but they have not utilized this data. So this selective picking of data about enforcing the laws and policies, is creating confusion. So that is why I'm saying that, are we asking the right questions? Now, coming to the impact of violence on women and children, we all know that violence endangers the life of women and children at home. It causes mortality, morbidity, physical injuries, and multiple hurts may result in various disabilities. There is a risk of communicable diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and it may cause fractures, bleeding, organ damage, loss of limb, and cumulative impact of different types of abuse, and multiple episodes may result in severe harm. So even research studies show that women exposed to violence experience different kinds of problems, such as unwanted pregnancies, violence during pregnancies associated with stillbirth, fetal injury, child mortality, low birth weight babies. Among new mothers, it could lead to less breastfeeding and less attention to immunization. About domestic violence also affects psychological well-being of women. It may lead to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorders, OCD, and suicidal thoughts. So panic attack, flashback, all kinds of symptoms are being reported by women in various clinical studies. So men who indulge in hurtful behavior, they have also shown certain conditions such as antisocial personalities, sociopathic personalities, and borderline personalities. Violence also makes severe impact on educational attainments and skill development of women, and it may influence her earning ability. So the studies have shown that women who experience abuse may have 35 to 46% lower earnings than women who may not experience violence. So it involves expenditure in terms of job loss, lost work days, less opportunities for career advancement and promotion. And a study in US show that a woman lost on an average 7 days after an incident of violence. So children in violent homes, they may not get the care they need. A mother who is abused may be in too much of pain to take care of the child. Children who witness violence suffer lasting psychological damage and problems such as anxiety, trouble in sleeping, depression, trauma, cognitive difficulties, and it affects their educational performance. So the various research studies have calculated the cost of domestic violence, and they call it direct cost and indirect cost. Direct cost may include simple treatments like hospitalization expenses, legal service cost, and other costs. Indirect cost may include reduced employment, distraction, loss of productivity, and it includes diminished value of life. So violence is impoverished society, families, and communities. Some of the studies, they have calculated the cost of domestic violence in terms of GDP and GNP. So in US, it is estimated that around 8 million days of paid work are lost because of this violence. And in India, we need to take up such studies. So here I'm flagging my second issue, that who is paying the cost of violence? When violence is making a severe impact, and it entails high cost for not only for individuals, children, families, societies, and communities. So then how the policymakers and law enforcers are addressing this issue in terms of rehabilitation of women, and all kind of things. Basically, I'm talking about more in terms of law, because in the legal discourse, we are talking about dilution of law. So state is pushing the norm of saving the family. So, I just want to say that, are we really saving the family or damaging the family in the long run? Now, this brings me to part 2, that is action taken to address the issue. In India and world over, women's organizations are talking about structural inequalities within marriage, providing shelter homes to battered women, reforming the legal system, and researching on different aspects of violence. In the legal discourse, specific theories have been propounded, such as battered woman syndrome, Stockholm syndrome, coercive violence, and SLAP and other strategies. So I will talk about a bit about them. Now, battered woman syndrome is, it is being developed to analyze the situation of women who is in situation of violence for a long time. She may become fearful and isolated, and she may develop learned helplessness. In legal field, the courts are using the idea of battered woman syndrome since 1990, starting from England. In R versus Ahluwalia, a case decided in 1992, on which a famous movie titled Provoked has been made. It is based on lived experience of an Asian woman who moved to UK subsequent to her marriage. And within 10 years, she faced brutalities. So eventually she ends up murdering her husband and was charged with murder. So women's organizations in this case and in several other cases expanded the legal definition of provocation and argued that these women have responded to years of cumulative abuse that they have faced. They call it a defense of necessity. In England and Australia and other Western countries, courts are using evidence in favor of women who use violence to defend themselves. In India, a few cases have looked into this aspect, and we need to debate more about this. Stockholm syndrome is another theory which talks about that why a woman continue to stay in a abusive relationship, and the research based on the experience of few captors, they say that she developed a traumatic bonding with the abuser. So scholars have used this paradox to define male-female relationship. So strategic lawsuits against public participation. This is another strategy where it is different from the ordinary lawsuits that seek to dissuade citizens from exercising their legal rights. These are frivolous counterclaims which are filed for the purpose where the purpose is not to remedy a wrong but to harm citizens. So frequently elite and powerful use the law to silence the victims. In violence against women cases, our experience of all the women's organizations show that how powerful men use all their might to harass the complainants, to force them into fear to withdraw their complaints. Now, several countries have enacted anti-SLAP legislation. In India, we need to think about this. So here I'm flagging my third issue, that is state in India has not looked into the fine nuances of, all these legal theories and principles. So women's movement in India and abroad have advocated for rights of victims and raised slogan that personal is political. And they have demanded to lift the wheels of privacy, but the state in India has not responded with equal enthusiasm. The state is propagating the dominant norms, ignoring the impact of violence on families. So what are the action taken in India? As Professor Patel has already said that during the decades of 80s, many women were dying due to stove deaths. So Section 498A and 304B were introduced to prevent such deaths and to deter violence. We all have heard the name of Shashi Bala, Kanchan Bala, Sudha Goyal, and so many other Tarvinder Kaur and so many other victims, who died during that period. So during that period, street plays were used to raise awareness. Protests were held to shame the families who demand dowry, and it is being insisted that police take strict action. So later in 1984, Family Court Act was enacted to provide ease of access to justice. Now, again, these courts deal with matrimonial dispute and not violence per se. Rather, some scholars have said that this law cemented the norm of good wife or a bad woman. Now this was happened 498A, 304B. Were enacted in the decade of 80s, and the experience of women's organizations show that once a woman filed a complaint under Section 498A, she was thrown out of her matrimonial homes. Parents do not accept her back easily. So Domestic Violence Act was enacted in 2005. It provides for civil remedies such as protection orders, residence orders, maintenance orders, and so on. The law ensures safety to women in domestic relationship in a household. It makes provision for service providers, protection officers, and ensures safety plan for women and children. It also mandates for providing shelter home, medical facilities, and other such services. However, no onus is placed on state to fulfill its responsibility. So if you see how this law is being implemented, the research studies show that the women, it's not easy for women to access justice. Timelines are mentioned in the Domestic Violence Act. They are never adhered. Simple protection orders may take years. The case linger in courts for years. In my own research and several research studies, we have found that many of the survivors were struggling hard to manage their lives, either with or without resources. They're trying to bring up their kids, running around in the courts, while also recovering and healing through the violence they have faced. The provisions such as shelter homes, medical facilities, and other services are either non-existent or they are too few to cater to the demands of growing need. Especially if I talk about Delhi. In Delhi, initially only 15 protection officers were appointed. Later, this number was enhanced to 18. So one PO is almost handling cases coming to 5 or 4, so many police stations. I think in Bombay, you have more of protection officers, but in Delhi, situation is completely different. So also other problems, what the researchers have found is that Domestic Violence Act talks about cruelty and it enhances the definition of cruelty. But the research indicate that women face continuous varied forms of violence and where victimization occurs simultaneously, from which escape is impossible. Law does not take into account many other forms of violence that are taking place within families. Also, the reliefs available are not in consonance with the with the violence women face. So analysis of case law indicate that frequently court relies on specific episodes of violence while ignoring the continuity of abuse. Coming to the judgments. What kinds of, women are facing a lot of problem, and when they come to the court, what kind of judgments the courts are giving. So the famous case of Anish Kumar versus State of Bihar, simple bail application, but the court issued the guidelines relating to arrest and bail. Similarly, Rajesh Sharma versus State of UP, the court issued the guidelines to formulate family welfare committees. Now, this was modified in 2018, but in other cases like Sushil Kumar Sharma, the court says by misuse of the provision, a new legal terrorism can be unleashed. In various other cases, filing a criminal case itself is considered as the act of cruelty. In one case, the court has imposed penalty on the aggrieved woman to file a false complaint under Domestic Violence Act. In other cases, they have talked about diluting the provision of the law, make it compoundable, or include women and minors as respondents. In yet other cases, set of cases, if the wife is not wearing Mangal Sutra or not putting on Sindoor, that is considered as an act of cruelty against husband. So even one court says that wife should undergo DNA test to prove that she is not disloyal, unfaithful, or adulterous. But for men, obviously, there are no such provisions. So, last week I read one of the High Court, it says that men may also file cases under Domestic Violence Act. Now, this is against the, what we have asked, women's movement has asked. So this kind of mindset operated during the colonial era also. If you see the case of Rukmabai and Philomeni, so that mindset is still operating till now. So what is happening in the court is that myths and stereotypes operate while ignoring the struggle of the woman. A complainant is discredited and disregarded while ignoring her trauma, her struggle to survive. So family ideology operate where focus is laid on saving the family and not to save the life or dignity of women and children. In many decisions, misogynist phrases such as disgruntled woman, liar, gold diggers are being used to undermine the principles of justice. Men file slap suits against women, and besides backlash operate to undermine the safety of women. Several scholars have argued that there is a linkage between dowry law and domestic violence law, and that is affecting the remedies available to women. So law provides a platform for women to raise their concerns, but what the state is utilizing is reconciliation, compromise, adjustment, and settlement, while mixing up the women's right to bargain for material and economic support, rather than delivering the right-based justice to the complainants. The issue of violence is lost behind the technicalities or procedural aspects, and complainants are deprived of restorative and rehabilitative justice. So in operation, the law offered a temporary relief to the victim, and in the process, the accountability of violent men could not be fixed for the criminal action. The rhetoric of misuse of law is leading to culture of impunity. So this logic of patriarchy is denying justice to women. So women are labeled as family breakers rather than the men who are committing the act of violence. They are not labeled as family breakers. So the woman, it's being used to silence the voices of women. So a battered woman complaint is dismissed while portraying her as a gold digger. Now this argument ignored the fact that frequently it is women's natal family that is arranging for dowry and wedding celebrations. Some of the research shows that the cost of wedding in today's time is between 5 lakhs to 5 crores. Now, who is making this investment, like, this, entire expenditure? Matrimonial laws do not allow for equal distribution of matrimonial property. At the time of separation or divorce, the women are, their unpaid work and contribution in the matrimonial home is not recognized. So, and also another thing is that media is propagating the false narrative that, the jails are filled with Sasnan and other relatives of husband. But I looked at the data of prison statistics and, the hard jail data, and only I found that 0.22% under trials are booked under 498A. So third question that, why there is a lot of difference. We have seen the data on the, the magnitude. We have talked about the cost and the impact of violence, But on the other hand, judicial decisions are giving completely different picture. The ground realities are completely different. So, what steps should be taken to bridge the gap between the data and the laws and policies for rehabilitation of survivors? And we can also discuss, about legal rights in terms of crime and impunity, rights and wrongs and power dynamics that operate within the family. So law is a site for, the different scholars have said that it is a subversive site, but it is also a site for resistance against oppression to defy patriarchal norms. So the magnitude of cases being brought show that, a lot of women are challenging the violent culture. But so the legal system has to create space for this women to raise their concern in a fair and impartial manner. World over, the laws, the police, and the courts are enabling patriarchy. And this is against the demands of women, that is to smash the patriarchy. So the need is to end misogyny and sexism. And so we have to ask the right questions. So I'll just, right now stop with this quote. The law should not be seen to sit limply while those, who seek its protection lose hope. So right now I'll just stop here, and maybe we can take, further questions, in discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Shalu Nigam, for a very, very comprehensive presentation. Along with your presentation, I would like to add that we also, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act has given an earmarked role to all service providers, whether it's a hospital or criminal justice system or a shelter home and counselor, medical. So even gender responsive budgeting to make this law more effective. That is also another important concern. But you have really given a very, very eagle's eye view of the whole journey from 2005 to 2021. Now I would like to ask Professor Raksha that you have been a sociologist and you are also director of Women's Studies Center, very different person, not only purely academician, but you have both academician and social activist. So I would like to ask you that NFHS 5 has brought out a very startling figure about spousal violence. As a sociologist, what is your analysis of such a high percentage of men and women justifying domestic violence? Have we failed in our duty as a women's studies scholar to mentor younger generation to be more judicious about the question of gender-based violence?
Thank you, Professor Vibhuti Patel. First of all, let me thank all of you for including me in the panel, because this is something that really interests me. And also, I would want to compliment Dr. Shalu Nigam for a wonderful, book that she's written. So I was so glad that I was included in this panel, because I had ordered the copy and I was not finding the time to read it. But given this opportunity, I actually read it, and it's a wonderful work. A huge, task that she's kind of compiled, and she's raised right kinds of questions also, which of course now she's done for us as well. Coming to Professor Patel's, query, because as you said, I have my sociology background, so I would not, say that whose fault is it, but one needs to understand that, we are structured in a way that there are n number of dimensions, which even Shalu has very nicely documented in her book, where she talks about three important things, three dimensions she's talking about. She says, and I'll just quote those three dimensions, which is, she says, there is, if we are talking about violence, we need to also see the domesticity, and third, the structural inequality. And for that, she goes on to talk about wonderfully 7 dimensions, which, which begin right from where domestic violence is taking place, which is home. And I'll also connect this to answering your query, Professor Patel, where you're asking that why is it happening? Why, the data is showing that there is so much of violence, and how, we are not able to deal with it. And people are also justifying to some extent that, spousal violence is okay. So in that, one, it is happening at home, something that is considered very safe. 2, it is being done by a person you are living with. So again, I'm quoting Shalu from her book, where she says, in domestic violence, it's like living and sleeping with your enemy. So every day you have to live with someone who's actually battering you, and you don't have a space where you go out or you can actually open up and say to this, that there is whole socialization pattern with the whole, learning theories, that we need to see that whatever we see, we reinforce. So the families, the home atmosphere where violence is a routine matter. So that gets internalized and one feels, oh, ye to theek hai, this is okay, because she's disrespecting the husband, disrespecting the in-laws. And then, we live in a society where chastity is given so much of value. We have whole intersectionality of gender, caste, class, and also which class we belong to. Higher and upper the class, greater the value which is given to the chastity and the pativrata nari. So I think all this together really is something that actually in some sense is making people say, yes, violence will take place. And I would want to bring in Rinki Bhattacharya's wonderful, work we all have read, Behind the Closed Doors, and her Char Diwari, wherein she shows us from all the classes and sections that it is not something that is restricted to a particular, society or strata. And the kind of heterogeneity that we have in our society, violence also is of that, multitude. So upper class, the next day you put makeup and you become fine and you present yourself, and in a lower class or caste strata, you go for work the next day with a, we have so many of our daily helps who come, I remember telling so many of them, why don't you go and file a complaint when you have a women's cell here? So they say, nahi, this is apna admi, I have to live with him, there is no way out, where will my children go, I have no support. So see, these are the things that again are very important. And I must say again, because given the last 3 days I've been reading Shalu's book, she's very wonderfully brought out, in which all of us keep talking, Professor Patel, we talk about unequal power relations. And our constitution initially thought all is well in a marriage, all is well in a man-woman relationship, which of course towards equality brought out so well that it's not all is not well. And now we have policies in place, but still it's taking time. I mean, I know women's organization, women's movement, being part of Women's Studies Association, I know the kind of efforts being put in and how slowly it's moving in, how it's such a slow and gradual process that people have started thinking that it's important that we need to take some effort. So,
but what can educational institution do to change the mindset of young minds? At least
I am
younger
actually quite,
generation.
Vibhuti ma'am, I'm quite disappointed even at the educational institutions personally with the CBSE scene happening just now, with the kind of, the unseen comprehension passage which they had put in. And, my colleague's daughter was appearing in the paper and she had actually, answered the first question saying that he's a misogynist. He has, there was a question saying, from this para, what do you derive? What kind of man this person is? In fact, the answer was a different answer because perspective was wrong there. But this girl, because it's growing in a home where there is a feminist mother, she says he's a misogynist man. But
they will fail her. They will fail her.
No, but now they have taken it off
Yeah, they have
and
taken,
they are giving them the pass marks. But this shows the mindset. This shows, see, and I would also answer almost Shalu's second question that she flagged off, that what is state doing? State is not even looking at it. State is, actually creating the spaces which they are calling sacred. They are actually eulogizing all, possible, what can I say? All those, you also said how Manu, everybody else said how women are, located where. So that whole welfareistic, whole, a good mother, a bad mother, sacrifice, the motherly behavior. I was the other day, although saying it in a lighter vein, but saying that all of us who have been doing so much of struggle all these years are going to be asked to stay at home, be good mothers, and then come back and, do all this activism, the kind of situation that's arising. So I think we also need to see education institutions, you're saying, we are, and you have been part of our gender sensitization awareness program, where we are trying our level best, where now students at this age only, when they're at college level, when they're at 18 plus and all that, start thinking in terms of these questions. But yes, the point does remain that that fear, and I'm reminded of Susan Brown Miller, where she says the fear of rape, which every man uses to threaten and intimidate a woman. And although marital rape still is struggling to be acknowledged and accepted as a proper rape, but then definitely it is where there is no consent. I've been watching a new web series a day before it came, wherein 7 times she enjoyed, 8th time she didn't want it, and then it was called a rape. Why was it called a rape? So the protagonist said this, and the other person retorts and says, yes, 8th time when she is saying no, it has to be taken as no.
Correct.
So
Question of consent and power. Consent
yes,
versus power. Yeah.
absolutely. So I think in this whole domestic violence discourse also, it is, it is the power and powerlessness which is always, in the equation. And one last point in this, and rest, of course, we can have the discussion. I definitely want to point out is when these guidelines were being made, sexual harassment guidelines, because we've been talking a lot about them recently in our sensitization program, wherein the victim was supposed to be the neutral when they were framing the guidelines. Late Justice Leela Seth has also documented it, that we wanted victim to remain neutral, giving fair chance to men also, in case, as Shalu also said, that it's a backlash, but honestly, it's not a backlash. In every program, in every discussion, this comes up, that women are misusing this DV Act, DV law, and we then need to kind of rethink about it, that are we actually. But there, when it was asked that victim has to be kept neutral, everybody declined, including the people sitting at the parliament, saying the whole idea of becoming powerless in front of maybe a woman or a man for a man is unthinkable. So we are thinking of a time where we would say egalitarian society. So I think that is what is making us.
No, and treating people equally when they are in unequal position, that itself is injustice. No, so
absolutely.
What you need is affirmative action. Thank you very much. National Education Policy 2020 has also suggested that we should start gender sensitization at the early childhood stage, so right from the age of 3, because by the time they are 17, 18, their ideas are already formed. So now I would like to ask Dr. Kanchan Mathur, who has done an extensive study. I think her doctoral study was on violence against women, and Sage had published a book. I remember reviewing it for Pacific Affairs. I would like to ask you that what is the status of implementation of POWDA Act, Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act in Rajasthan, and is budgetary allocation for implementation of the act adequate, and what are your suggestions for the improved performance of the state to strengthen survivors of domestic violence, not only your state, but all over India? Yeah. Over to Professor Kanchan Mathur. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, you
can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Vibhuti, for giving me this opportunity. You want me to answer all the questions together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the last one you can give in the second round. So alternatives and way forward. Yeah. So better you stick to this too.
So as far as the implementation of the act goes, I'll begin with the positive statement by saying that yes, Rajasthan does have a structure. We have a Department of Women's Empowerment in which there is a protection cell like many other states, and that has taken the responsibility for the implementation of the act. However, having said that, I think we need to look at what is the state of affairs in a state like Rajasthan. So till 2014, we did not have a single protection officer in place. Okay, so after all the struggle we put in and the women's movement coming together, till 2014, we did not have it. Then in 2019, the government decided to instate some 13 protection officers. And in 2021, this year, they have given an order for another 17. Okay. When you look at the kinds of protection officers. So initially what they did was they gave in 2014, they gave additional charge to all the CDPOs and the Sakhis of the Women's Development Program, they're an additional charge. So obviously the women's movement was up in arms and they said, this is not going to happen. So then they said, all right, independent protection officer will be appointed. Then once that was done, we find that majority of them are men. They are not women. So this whole debate that we are having, the discourse where we are talking about mindsets and what do they think about and how they think that domestic violence is something which is legitimate. Okay? And the other issue to my mind is of the kinds of, there has been no training. 2.5 hours orientation was given to the first batch of 13. On December 23rd and 24th, we are supposed to be having a 1-day orientation for the new batch of 17. Now, with the state, which is the largest state in the country, with 33 districts, this is the cadre of people who are going to be implementing the act. So that is the first critical thing to my mind. Second is that none of them, though they are coming from a judicial background as mandated by the law, none of them have ever been exposed to gender sensitization. They, like I said, and like my other colleagues have mentioned, they think that domestic violence is legitimate. They have internalized this. If you talk to the women, very common phrases in Rajasthan, Marta hai, Data hai, meaning he's a provider for me and my children, so he has the right to beat me, right? So the women also, this whole image of a good woman is one who will suffer in silence. The good woman is one who will, get beaten and, take it lying down. She will not speak about it. This is the good women. And in a stringently patriarchal society like Rajasthan, women themselves say, if ये पति है, ये परमेश्वर है, अगर ये मुझको मारता है, ठीक है. Okay? So this is a state which we are talking about, where you have minimal number of protection officers, where you have no structures at the block level whatsoever. You have minimal structures, and I think Dr. Shalu also mentioned that where are the short stay homes? Short stay homes are by nature short stay, right? And then you have this whole issue of either you will have them like the Nari Niketans, where the women are again exploited, or you will have a provision that 3 to 5 days is what you can stay here and then you have to leave. So where does she go? Where is the whole clause of right to residence coming in? It is not. So my thing is that there are these multiple problems. You have the act, but the unfolding of the act, and all of us, I think none of us would disagree that when it comes to implementation, we have these huge gaps that are coming. Okay, and if you look at, again, like I said, that when the protection officer goes to write his direct information report, what is he probing into, right? Marpeet hai, mara kya? The whole issue of sexual violence is not coming into it. Majority of the women, if you talk to them, they say that I cannot talk to him. Correct. Sexual violence की बात मैं इसे नहीं कर सकती हूँ. Okay, so she does not know how to unwind or how to vent her grief to a male who is completely insensitive. So if you look at the records, some of the data that I have looked at, the sensitively run Mahila Salah Suraksha Kendra, if you look at their records, 20% of cases pertain to sexual violence. In majority, not more than 2%. So this is the reality of a state like Rajasthan. The third issue to my mind comes when we are talking about initially when the act came into being, there was a whole lot of backing by the women's movement. And, like I said, that we all said dual responsibility. We will not agree to dual responsibility of field level workers to have something like this or take on this additional role. So initially, the state was compensating the women. The state was taking a role in a more proactive role by compensating or by at least saying that the judiciary passing the thing saying यहाँ पर हिंसा हुई है, यहाँ अब नहीं हो सकती है. But if you look at the scenario today, there is a situation in which there is cross inaction all over the state. At the district and state level, we have the Zilla Mahila Suraksha Samitis. At the state level, we have something called the state legal services agencies, which are taken up this role again, working under the collector. But if you look at the department which is supposed to be taking the nodal role in this, I find that it is not taking that role. So what are we having? We are having, on the one hand, we have minimal protection officers, the state being totally inactive or quiet on this, compensation not being paid, short stay homes don't exist. So there are a plethora of problems. If at all they would consider having block level structures, I think to a large extent we would be able to resolve this issue. But it is not happening. Capacity building and training, not happening. Appointing officers, not happening. So my contention is, what is happening then? There is minimal that is happening by way of the implementation of the act. So I can stop here and then take your other questions later.
About the budgetary allocation. Yeah.
Budgetary. Okay. So as far as the budgetary allocation is concerned, you have the salaries of these 30 protection officers. Okay. There are no SOPs. There are no guidelines. There is nothing.
No one-stop crisis center and counselors
exist, but only in the MSS case. Yeah, made on the TIS model in Rajasthan. The Mahila Salah Suraksha Kendra, the counselors are there. But if you look at what the nodal agency is doing by way of providing these structures, then it is not doing. And like I said, even the Bihar SOPs were made by an agency in Rajasthan, but the Rajasthan government has not approached that agency to put the SOPs in place. So there is no clarity, transparency. People don't know what is happening by way of what should be done. So to my mind, there is a lot that can be done, and I will then come to this when I answer it for, like you said, that not only for Rajasthan, then it can be for all states. I have 4-5 suggestions.
Thank you, Dr. Kanchan. Mathur, I think more or less all of us are experiencing the same thing. Only thing, in Maharashtra, we have one-stop crisis center. In the hospital, in the casualty ward of hospital. There is a response from Advocate Celine Thomas from Bangalore that I have a lady clients who are feeling cornered and browbeaten by members of church, oftentimes due to inherent bias of the parish priest and pastor. Women end up having to battle not only in court, but also in the community, especially when they are abandoned by their husbands. So, which is very true. That community pressure is also very, very high to seek compromise and to put up with the situation.
Yeah. So invariably, they will tell the women to adjust. No, this adjust has become a real term in our society.
No, and in Gujarat, they also say, we have invested so much in your marriage. We have spent so much in your marriage. It has to work. No, so that also, the commercial ethos also come.
And Vibhuti, we have the one-stop crisis centers. Okay, it is not as though we do not have. We have the Mahila Salah Suraksha Kendra. But how many? The main issue to my mind is that women do not know about the act.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's the dissemination of the act per se does not exist. So something for a wider dissammination.
Because all the public education advertisement and government advertisement are either about HIV/AIDS or population control. There is nothing about other developmental needs of women, or even the gender-based violence is not a priority.
Just one point, Vibhuti. Ma'am, let me tell you, even we have one-stop centers, we have women's cells across, but we've had, experiences while doing research that people who go for complaining, people sitting in these cells and centers only discourage them and send them back and start talking in terms of look at the kind of women who've come. देखो ये कैसी औरतें
अच्छे
आई
घर की
हैं.
औरतें पुलिस स्टेशन नहीं आती. That even I have heard while accompanying Rinki Bhattacharya to the Bandra police station when she used to get battered. No,
Yes,
they said, but
yes.
ma'am, you are doing PhD. Women from good families don't come to police.
Yes.
And this
No.
is a hill road, posh area, queen of Mumbai suburb. No, I used to get such answers.
So
Now,
you
madam,
advise them to either adjust and don't break your family.
Correct.
अपना परिवार को मत तोड़ो.
Correct.
So you are the bad woman if you are going to break your family.
Yeah,
You're a bad woman if
and
you're
the
going to
whole
speak about-
and the whole binary of honor and shame. You know, on
Yes,
one end there's honor
absolutely.
and the other end.
Absolutely.
And they said today's women are fickle minded. Today they have come to complain. Tomorrow you would see them going for a movie with the same husband. That kind of response is also police has given. So, ma'am, Anchita Ghatak, what is your experience in Calcutta? After that, I come to you, Dr. Shalu Nigam.
Yes,
You'll be getting a chance to answer all the queries. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm very happy to be here at this talk, but though it's not about a happy topic at all. And it's, what can I say? I mean, our experiences are not particularly different. I mean, it's, you have been talking about unequal power relationships. Of course, unequal power relationships are there. And I think one of the things that the PWDVA has done, and which all of us have known, but we were unable to articulate, when we talk of domestic violence, it's not just spousal violence. Yes, spousal violence is a very big issue, women being subject to various kinds of violence by their husbands or other, by their husbands. And but the other thing also that PWDVA articulated for many of us is that violence against women happens in the natal home, and the person who's being violent is not only the husband. There are other relatives both in a woman's natal family, as well as if she's married or in a relationship like a marriage, in the marital family also, who are abusive towards women. And in Parichiti, we work with women domestic workers, so we do see a lot of the violence that domestic workers and other informal sector women workers are subject to, other poor women are subject to. And despite the PWDVA, despite 498A, getting redress is not easy. I mean, just this evening, this afternoon, there was this woman in our office who, who's being she's moving between her natal home and her marital home, because nowhere is she accepted, nowhere is she getting peace. And there are different kinds of violence that are perpetrated on her in these situations. So, so she's running from one house to the other, trying to see where she can be peaceful. I mean, this is one story, yes, but this is illustrative of much of the crisis that women face. And for us, I think a very, very, two really important issues are that there's no infrastructure to deal with this whole issue of a woman facing violence, trying to run her life and the life of her children, because I mean, where are the homes? And even when if you find a short stay home or a home, is a very controlling act. But
I think the connectivity is the problem.
Yeah, connectivity.
I think
Network.
Average. Can you hear me? I lost my connection for some time.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. Now we can hear you. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So talking of protection officers, I mean, I feel, and they really don't have the kind of support that they need. Maybe we need more protection officers. But I mean, the other important thing, and I think, this is really, really important, because when a woman is trying to get away from an abusive situation, she also needs that, she needs something to sustain her. She needs that economic support. And we know how statistics have been in India, that more and more women are, numbers of women in the labor force are decreasing. And that's also a very, very disturbing situation, because if the shelter homes don't provide the kind of support needed, if a woman is she's fled her abusive marital home, or she wants to flee it, where will she go? I mean, if she doesn't have economic resources, if there is no safe place for her to stay and for her children, this is a really, really distressing situation. And unfortunately, in the 21st century, we are in Bengal, we are still grappling with it. I mean, Professor Patel, you asked me about Calcutta. Yes, Calcutta is where services, I mean, compared to the rest of the state, things are probably better in Calcutta. But here also, most of the time, we're just, looking around for support and help. And
Institutional support is not there. Yeah.
yes, there is absolute lack of institutional support. And I mean, since we are talking about the PWDVA, I mean, one of the important things that the PWDVA talks about, other than physical, sexual, verbal and economic abuse, is also, verbal and emotional abuse is also economic abuse. And a woman, when she is in a violent situation, faces economic abuse. And but there is nothing in the world outside that helps her combat this in a very definite way. And I'm not at all saying that only if she had an income, then everything would be solved. No, but having an income is a very important tool in
Minimum
fighting
necessary condition. Minimum
abuse.
necessary
Yes, absolutely. So this is how things are in Bengal. And of course, NGOs try, a little while ago, someone was talking about dissemination of the law. And I think that's really important. And that's something that the state should take on. But no point in, just making, I mean, people aware of the law without providing the institutional support and the infrastructure that is required for women to make a better life. I mean, even registering a complaint is a time consuming. And
so many times we have to organize demonstration only to get the FIR registered. No?
Yes, precisely. And or even to meet the protection officer, talk. I mean, it's not easy. It's and while I don't want to paint everyone with a black brush, I think people are trying, but we need much more.
Yeah, because helplines have been there like throughout last 18 months, and more than 1,25,000 complaints have been registered. But what has happened about that, nobody is reporting on, neither National Commission for Women nor the State Commission for Women. There is a response here from Kerala, from Nina Joseph. I am retired professor from Institute of Management in Government, Kerala. The Act mandates Planning Board and Social Justice Department and Institute organized many programs. We had sector specific programs and also mixed programs dissemination. And state had directed about 100 programs for all actors, including magistrates, lawyers, elected representatives, doctors, protection officer, and type of remarks made by magistrates and police officers are not all different from those made by the elected representatives. So one major missing link in the DVA implementation is a lack of knowledgeable person to accompany the victim. Victim needs continuous accompaniment to traverse the criminal justice system and also for continuous psychological affirmation. So she has been in the planning board and she has shared her experience. So now we have a profile of 5 states: Maharashtra, Kashmir, Rajasthan, West Bengal, and Kerala. And now I would like to ask Advocate Gayatri Sharma, who is director of Women Power Connect. Women Power Connect has done many studies on the Domestic Violence Act and its implications for National Mission for Empowerment of Women, Ministry of Women and Child Development, National Commission for Women in our country. So what is your experience of One Stop Crisis Center, and how does the survivor of violence, how did they manage during the pandemic period?
Okay, thank you so much. I'll just go for the first question, the second part of the question first about the pandemic, because the pandemic has really changed the way we discuss domestic violence. And the first point that I want to make is that when the PWDVA was drafted, one of the rationale for the law was that the role of the police would be minimized because women feel uncomfortable going to police stations. You don't have enough women police officers, so we reduce the role of the police. But what we saw with the lockdown was that if there was only police, actually there was no access to protection officers, there was no access to courts. So it was really only the police who were there. And speaking to what happened with Women Power Connect was that the number of calls we got reduced because our landline was, we also were working from home, so we were not getting many calls. So when speaking to colleagues, I found that the interaction with police, I will not be as negative, I'm sorry, as other panelists. It's not that bad. Yes, there is a tendency to say, go back home and adjust. But at the same time, because the husband is scared of the police and that is the only thing that instills fear, there is a slight improvement in his behavior. This has been noticed, in fact, in the one-stop center in Odisha, Madhyam Center for Women, Support Center for Women. It's a counseling center where they tie up with the police station, because in by sending asking the husband to come for counseling on the letterhead of the police, they do show up. In other cases, they don't normally show up for counseling because they're not really scared. So this has been, I think we do need to rethink how we engage with law enforcement officials more. Secondly, there were some very positive court judgments during this period. One was Batra versus Batra was overruled. So now a woman has a right to reside in the house of the in-laws. This is a judgment of Satish Ahuja versus Sneha Ahuja. Even if the husband it does not the owner of the property, she has a right to stay in her father-in-law or mother-in-law's house. And this is true in the Indian context where men and where property is usually ancestral and people do live with a joint family. Also, there has been, it was because of the courts that protection officers were named as an essential service. It was only in June 2020, the middle of the first wave, that due to a court order that protection officers were given the status of being essential. So I think the courts have really been the last hope. It's just a stick to cling on to, but it's really the last hope for many women. With one-stop centers in Delhi, I can speak of, it's actually a little bit confusing because we have them in hospitals also and in the courts as well. In the courts, they offer counseling and mediation. With my experience, I think the mediation online is not working very well, because with mediation, you need to be able to see the person, you need to be able to see their body language to do proper mediation. So maybe we need to, I don't know how we can improve this, because there will be more lockdowns maybe with the third wave. Again, very recently with the one-stop center, the director of WCD, Ms. Rashmi Singh, she gave a good notification. She said that you cannot deny the right for any woman victim of violence, including domestic violence, residence, but that's only for one day. So again, if in Delhi the situation is this bad that it's only for one night, then where is she going to go the next night? So yes, the shelter is I think the biggest problem that we are facing right now with the one-stop centers.
In Bombay, we have like YWCA and several 13 shelters for women where they are ready to, it's a short stay home, not only for a day or two, but nearly 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And they also help in identifying the place of employment as well as alternate shelter or working women's hostel. Yeah. But you have so many night shelters for women, no, in Delhi?
Those are, yes, there are other night shelters, but it's very difficult to get admission. There's YWCA, YMCA, you end up having to know somebody there because they're full. All the time they're full. The government shelters, again, not in good condition.
Correct.
The OSCs, the notification was only for one night emergency stay. So
yeah, I understand. There is a response from Advocate Kalpana Gavaskar, who had a very heroic role in women's centers. She's legally supporting, and she led a very heroic battle in court and out of court for the women survivors of violence. And she says that I have questioned that the crisis in judicial systems, such as pending of large number of cases, now lots of attention are given to mediation in litigations by the panels of advocates, retired judges, etc. What are your suggestions, and how can the Domestic Violence Act looked at? And government and judiciary is giving a lot of importance to mediation. So in what way, like the Powder Act will be effective? Another response is from Madam Nina Joseph, that one psychiatrist who co-journeyed our DV training forged linkages with some police officials. Sometimes he calls up police, say that please intimidate the abuser. Seamless coordination among the actors is crucial. Coordination sans ego clashes. And during the lockdown in Kerala, Kutumbashri opened the frustration box for women, and Kutumbashri in all districts in 1 week free stay and also counseling support. So I think that is much more than other states have done. No? Yeah. So now I think first of all, Anchita, Advocate Shalu, you can answer some of the issues that are raised. And there is one question here which says that what could be the impact of change of age at marriage on domestic violence? Because the studies have shown that in child marriages, domestic violence is much, much higher because the girl has to be tamed to adjust to the new home. No, so that kind. And she's more vulnerable. The child bride is far more vulnerable than the adult one. Yes, Dr. Shah.
Yeah. Now it's a wonderful discussion which is taking place. So now we get to know about so many states. But my issue is like, similar question, things are coming up that women are not aware. And what I want to say is that on the other hand, what the courts are doing, the courts are saying, okay, they're just dismissing the cases. So that is what I just want to highlight, that, we have to engage more with the courts, more with the judicial trainings, and otherwise I think earlier you have all these kinds of efforts which have been going on. I don't know now, right now I think this thing is being reduced, that sensitization and training of judiciary and training of lawyers and other things which we have to take up. And somebody also said that about the economic empowerment of women. Yeah, surely that is, we have to have some kind of skill development program, some kind of policies about, women empowerment. So, if a woman is walking out of the, violent home, where should she go? Because parents generally don't accept. So, what kind of measures should we have? What kind of rehabilitation things? And then about the children, because in many cases, children, they don't have, that kind of support. So, they're being shuttled. In the court cases also, we have seen that, in the custody disputes are there, children are being, being used as a pawn in the custody battle. So that also we have to see that how to address that issue. So another thing is about this lack of knowledge. Yeah, surely we lack knowledge about domestic violence. Women are not aware. Sometimes, the law interns themselves who are, if they're coming to, and I'm interacting with them, I found that, that sometimes even law interns are not aware of domestic violence law provision. So that is what we have to, maybe something at the college level, something we have to do, about all this trainings and all. And yeah, this lockdown has really, made impact on, because cases are pending for past 2 years. I don't know how many cases are really being, taken up by the courts, during this lockdown period, because again, there's so many cases which are coming to me, like, that custody disputes, they say, okay, you do the visitation by the video conferencing. Now people are facing, those kind of problem. So how to address that?
Maintenance cases for months together, women did not get because courts were not operating, and they did not have digital connectivity. Women did not.
Yeah, so those are the different issues that we have to talk about. And also, in case there are many cases where men don't pay the maintenance even after the court's order. So you have to file the execution application, and the cases linger on for years. So what to do in those kind of cases? So to really find some kind of some kind of mechanism to ensure that at least women and children get maintenance. So how this could be done, we have to really brainstorm on that. So yes, I think
there are two more responses. One is from Snehal. Is discharge application under section 239 CRPC maintainable in DV Act in case of domestic violence? And in one of the cases, like which I received yesterday, a matter is of 2017 and in the notice, and yet interim order is not passed. And second, this thing is from Vidya Chaurpagare from Nagpur. I'm Professor Vidya from Nagpur. The proportion of women in politics is low, and few women who are in politics don't talk too much about domestic violence or caste-based violence against women. Why is that? Women are very active in the social movements, the women's rights activists and feminists, and they are providing institutional support, but they are not in the mainstream politics. Yeah,
I think I can just give a
yes,
response to this.
Yes.
I think why women are a little careful about not talking about these issues is because of the kind of space they've got. This has been a space which has come after a long struggle. Otherwise politics was a space which was not available, and otherwise also now there are very few women who are actually into politics based on their own efforts. So I think they in some sense are playing safe also, because this is a problem which would then not let them come again in the politics. So I think this is something which is very, very important. And although personally, if you ask me, I would want women to talk about these issues more as compared to men. But then this domain, because this is particularly politics, if women are playing safe to stay longer in this and then be able to create some kind of dent, I think I'm on for it.
And with great difficulty, they have made place in man's world. So they also would try to conform to man.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of strategically also one has to kind of.
For them, it's a survival struggle in the politics.
Yeah.
This is just I just want to share. This is reported in Hindustan Times in 2019. A 36-year-old tribal woman who was brutalized by the piece of metal, and she's hospitalized in a critical condition in intensive care unit, and doctors have removed a 20-centimeter long grip of motorcycle handle from her uterus, which has damaged her bladder and bowel. Now she's been suffering from intense pain for several months, but her husband has not allowed her to see the doctor, fearing arrest. So when her pain became unbearable, she went to police station and she fell unconscious there. Her husband is a laborer, and alleged assault took place 8 months ago when she confronted him over his relationship with another woman. Now she said in the hospital, I will never forgive my husband for what he has done, but I am worried over future of my 6 children who are now being forced to do something for what will they do for the living. So this is, the kind of situation women are in. And on the other hand, if I compare it to the response of the courts and the response of the state that, there are no shelter homes, there nothing. So protection officers are so less in numbers. So if I compare these two situations, I really found, that there is some, we have to do something about that. And this is the only thing I want to raise, that either legally, socially, whatever coordinated response we can ensure, we have to do that somehow. This is something which I want to raise.
Yeah, correct. Extreme.
Can I say
sheer helplessness of? Yeah, please go. Yes,
first of all, regarding the first question, the Domestic Violence Act is a civil law. So the question of discharge of the accused, in my opinion, that would not arise based on police report. Secondly, regarding the lower number of women in politics, very few people spoke about it. I do want to credit to Naveen Patnaik, who said that men should help in the housework, because what happened during the lockdown was the huge amount of housework that women had to do and care responsibilities. And I think he was the only one who said that the burden has to be shared equally. And I wish more politicians had said it.
Yeah. No, but this, when you say that the DV Act is a civil law, but it has a criminal jurisdiction,
yes.
No? In case
yes,
of,
it does. So for maintenance, in case of failure to if case the respondents does not follow any of the orders of the court, then that criminal action can be taken against him. But I don't think discharge under CRPC.
No, but in Bombay, we have seen that even in case of violence, sexual when violence takes place and woman contacts the helpline, police helpline, police evacuates the tormentors. Woman remains in the house, and all the tormentors, whether it's mother-in-law, father-in-law, husband, all of them are thrown out of house. So that kind of action police takes in case of domestic violence. There is a police helpline. And they also work in collaboration with the women's organization, Akshara. So they work with them. So that is one good thing about this law, that action can be taken.
Yeah, so I think we have to replicate this Bombay model, like Raksha model to other states also, so that we should take this act forward.
Yeah, there is one more comment from Nina Joseph. In Kerala during the lockdown, our CM said that if man abuse women from during lockdown, they will go to lock up. And he said that man should help women in domestic chores. So we have another politician also who said that. And yes.
Yes, but I also think we need to change our language. We always say men should help women. I mean, it's
their duty. It's a shared
everyone in a household is responsible for housework.
Correct. Everyone is.
And because, every time we say help, it's like it is the woman's responsibility. Correct. Yeah. And everyone is helping.
It should be partnership, and she says, Nina Joseph.
Yes, and I think household work has to be seen as life skills. I mean, these are just skills to survive. That's all.
Yeah. So now this is the final round. Now you have all of you can just take 2 to 3 minutes for the way ahead and what should be the action agenda to combat domestic violence. Yeah. So can we start with would you like to start, Dr. Shalu?
Yeah, okay.
What should be the immediate now in future, what we need to do?
Yeah, shall I share my screen?
Yeah.
There are some slides which I prepared. Sorry, again, this is stuck. Yeah, so domestic abuse, what I see is not a man versus a woman's issue, like, the courts are seeing that. So it's about eliminating the repressive patriarchal culture that is affecting women and children the most. So the need is to explore the solution beyond the domain of law, such as qualitative medical care and legal aid, shelter homes, short stay homes that we all are talking about, childcare facilities, and economic and social security provision for victims and survivors of the abuse in order to ensure their right to life with dignities. Again, somebody has already said that marriage has to be viewed as partnership or companionship, and a family has to be seen as a democratic institution.
Correct.
Again, the strengthening the implementation of law has to be done with the aim to ensure safety and security of women and children in home. As you say, said that, in Maharashtra, police are, vacating the abuser. So maybe, these kind of things could be replicated across the other states. So maybe we can have kind of good practice model or something like that. Then women's right to matrimonial property need to be legitimized. This is what I feel. So maybe, we can have a discussion about that. And we need to recognize women's unpaid invisible contribution in the matrimonial homes. And we have to protect the women's right at the time of separation and divorce. And the concept of battered woman syndrome and all kind of other legal discourse, those kind of things that has been accepted in many countries. Now India need to debate that in the wider context. Then advocating for rights and policies of victims and survivors. Again, economic independence. We have been talking about that. So again, I'll focus on that. So I'll just end with this quote. I myself have never been able to find out precisely what feminism is. I only know that people call me feminist whenever I express sentiments that differentiate me from a doormat. So this is 1913. So with this, I will end, and we can have more discussion later on. Even outside.
But now recently we have seen some of the family courts and lower court, they have given very good judgment in case like in Bombay, a man wanted to, he says, I want to dispose of my wife. She's of no use. I have a cook, I have a help, I have a chauffeur, I have a gardener. I don't want this and I won't pay a penny. She's useless. She's just a sponge. No? And the court, they use the time use analysis. For the first time, we have a time use survey, 2019, Ministry of Statistics has done. And they use that how many years she invested in this marriage, how many children she produced, how, and accordingly they can calculated the amount, and they asked him to give a lump sum to the court, and they said court would, the interest of that amount will be given to her for rest of her life. And the amount was quite big, like according to husband's this thing, salary and other income they had calculated. So there are several such judgments we are getting. Also in Chennai, court in Chennai also they had given similar this thing. Then in accident compensation case also, valuation of housewives' contribution, no, that has now started coming. Yeah, so that is one encouraging sign. Yeah. So now, Professor Kanchan, Mathur, what would you like to say?
Okay, so very quickly, I think 4 or 5 points come to my mind. One is, of course, wider dissemination of the law. Particularly looking at the number of early marriages that are taking place. Yeah, the overburden of housework, the non-initiation into sexual intercourse, the kinds of adverse impacts that early marriage is having on little girls, and also in the light of the fact that we are talking in terms of increasing the age of marriage. So there's this whole debate going alongside, and the act is mandating that girls should also be able to take benefit. So I think at one level, we'll have to take the dissemination on maybe in a campaign mode, or people will have to evolve different ways. We have to disseminate. Structure very, very, very important to my mind. Appointing independent protection officers at the block level, and also the fact that we will need to put structures in place at the block level, because the issue to my mind is not being resolved by state level and district level. We'll have to have these structures, have both block level, independent block level protection officers and structures simultaneously being put in place. Third is, of course, this whole issue we'll be talking about short stay homes, spaces where women can go to, which are safe spaces, because like we are all agreed that if the home is not safe, where does she go? And she will only take recourse to outside the home when the home becomes unsafe. So we will have to put these structures in place. Fourth issue to my mind is the entire issue of capacity building and training. not only of the protection officers, but also the police, also the judiciary, which are all coming together to implement this act. Fourth, to my mind, is the entire collation of data. The categories under which we are collating data, in Rajasthan, to my mind, there are a number of different places where data is collected, but there is no central space where you can look at it and then analyze it. So need to have
what
collation of
about
data,
the
which is
live-in
segregated.
relationship? What about the violence in live-in relationship? In Bombay,
Yes.
we have in
Live-in relationships. Yes.
Maharashtra
This
government has accepted, but else.
Yeah, the fact that it's the first time that we have, looked at lived-in relationships, and then we are not looking at it. The fact that we are saying right to residence, expanding the definition of domestic violence to include, partner violence, and then when an incident like that takes place, then we are completely ignoring it. So very important to bring that. Then, to my mind, budget. Increased budget for all the activities across the board.
And all service providers, hospitals,
all service providers. We have to relook, we have to reallocate our budgets. And lastly, I feel that whether we are talking about the one-stop crisis center, whether we are talking about Mahila Suraksha Kendra, we will have to have people who are running them who have a feminist perspective. You cannot have people who are totally insensitive to gender-based violence or gender-based discrimination and running these homes, running these centers, running these NGOs. I think we just have to put a stop. Yeah. So these are just a few points that came to mind.
I think in corroboration, Dr. R. Vasanti, she says that execution of court orders passed under Domestic Violence Act is so weak. What is your suggestion to strengthen the part of execution of court orders? I think I'll ask Dr. Gayatri Sharma. And she also says that we have to give more stress to safety plan. It is detailed in the rules of domestic violence. Until women get out of house, she has to be safe. So that is her comment. Now, Madam Anchita Ghatak, what would you like to say?
Well, I think most things have been said, and it's a thing of just re-emphasizing. I think we can't re-emphasize, we can't re-emphasize enough the need to have an increased budget so that service providers are able to give what they can, and of course, dissemination of the PWDVA law. But I think there also has to be work at the conceptual level, in the sense that how do we look at this whole issue of violence? And we have to link all the kinds of violence, because if you have a violent state, since we have been talking about the pandemic, and one of the things that was discussed often and reported is how violent the state was towards people, vulnerable people, So if your state is violent, homes are violent. It's, the disciplining, so-called disciplining children is done through violent means, and we think that's absolutely permissible. So this whole business of violence, that this is not something that civilized people do, is something we really need to work on, because in the beginning of this talk there was this discussion on the NFHS data. Yes, because if you have a picture of society where people can be brought to line by using violence on them, then that's something that all children internalize. And
both men and women had opined that
yes, absolutely, because this is what
violence is justified.
Yes. So I think we really need to talk about that, and we need to look at all forms of violence, because I think this is really, really important that, when we are talking of domestic violence, it is not just spousal violence we're looking at. Women are subjected to various kinds of violence both in their
Women
natal homes and their marital homes.
True.
And single women have a tough time in our society. So
Yes.
And
I
here
think
she says that we need to also discuss domestic violence experienced by unmarried women in the families of their choice. And I think we have seen Bombay's health statistics. The women dying due to, girls dying due to unnatural reasons between 15 to 25 age group is as high. And they are unmarried girls in their parents' family, because the reasons can be she cut her hair, or she wore sleeveless, or she was spotted
an
in
unsuitable
company of a
boyfriend.
boy and all. Yeah. So those are the reasons. So statistics
and also a boy from a community which is not acceptable.
Yes, accepted.
That's very important. Caste, gender,
religion. Yeah, correct. So now, Gayatri ji, can you answer this question about that? What can be done to get the court orders executed efficiently?
Yes, so particularly with maintenance orders, because that is what women ask for the most, they are hardly ever given the maintenance. So one good practice is that filing of an income affidavit. The moment the case starts, both parties have to declare how much income they make, and they file it along with the papers. And in fact, this fellow Yo-Yo Honey Singh, when he was getting divorced from his wife in Delhi, he didn't file his income affidavit. So the magistrate summoned him and she made him do it. Okay. So that is one good practice. But I think also we cannot be over dependent on the law, and there are limitations to how much legal orders will get us. So we need to think of other ways as well.
And also socialization, no? Because the first organization that emerged in 1970 was Awaj, that don't suffer in silence, fight against injustice. No, that's how in Gujarat this Ahmedabad Women's Action Group talked about. Or the way my nani said that अन्याय करना नहीं है, अन्याय सहना नहीं है. You will not perpetrate violence and you will not put up with violence. And we are hardworking people. The moment you are humiliated or discriminated, my doors are open. So parents will also have to boost the morale of their daughters. They don't put up with this kind of violence. So more support even from the parental family is also very important, and boosting the morale of your daughter to stand up to her values and to stand up for her dignity. That's also very important. Yes.
Yeah. So I think because I'm someone who's into curriculum framing and teaching, etc. So I feel where even Professor Kanchan was also saying that we need to make them aware. So maybe we can make an effort to include the information. See, we already have awareness of gender in class 9. Students start talking in terms of gender as one of the important variables of society. So also about violence and how there are laws and how it's important that we go violence free. As Anchita she's also saying that we need to be violence free. So I think somewhere we need to inculcate, and as Vibhuti ji is saying, we need to show it. Children are not always taught. They catch things that happen around them. It's so normal that husband to say shut up to wife, and wife doesn't need to even retort back. It's okay that he's saying shut up to me. So that kind of a thing. So right from including in curriculum the kind of content that we are giving them, and also to awareness. And I think because I've been associated with a lot of volunteer work along with the students, I have a lot of student volunteers working with me for last so many years. And we've been going to the adopted villages, to places, etc. So one important component, which even the government does, ministry sends us these important things to be, talked about in the community, and then they take an account of that, whether you did that or not. So in that, in case a whole awareness about all these laws which are available to the women who are not literate, who do not have access to this and have no idea where they can go when they are in a situation like this, would also, I think, help. And one very, very serious thing that we need, all of us need to do is have a check on media. I mean, what is being portrayed, what is coming on OTT, what is being, and how it is being served, and how we are just digesting it, going on and on, is something that we need to really question. Just that line saying, if you have any objection to the content, please file a complaint with this and all that. will not do,
No, and the censor board, sometimes even very sensible women are there in the censor board, but the way the complaint has to be registered, it has to be the viewers who have to write. The board members of the board, they can't initiate. So they
as viewers, as normal, as common people, maybe like, for example, when I teach my gender and society class, I always show them certain, clips and clippings and tell them to think critically. And I always encourage them to write against it. Like, for example, since day before the Miss Universe discourse has started, and we've been critically talking in terms of what is this standardized beauty that we're talking about. I mean, all of them look alike. All of them are, this whole slimness and fairness, and they all are working with the marginalized groups. They're all working for the destitutes. They're all, in their talks, it's all so plastic. It's all so stage made. So somewhere we also need to critically, evaluate and talk and pass it on somewhere. I mean, just talking would also not help. Somewhere making a dent on what is happening. So in larger, in one sentence, if I have to say, redefining everything, redefining the values, redefining what is being served, redefining what is being seen also.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you all. Dr. Shalu, then Professor Kanchan, Anchita Madam, Gayatri, Advocate Gayatri Sharma, and Vishav for your very, very erudite presentation. And I would like to now sum up the issue. I would begin with the quotation from Kofi Annan when he said, Dr. Kofi Annan said that violence against women is perhaps most shameful human rights violation. It is perhaps the most pervasive. It knows no boundary of geography, culture, or wealth. As long as it continues, we cannot claim to be making real progress towards equality, development, and peace, which was the motto and which 165 countries had accepted as a mission in 1975. There is a need for affirmative action to protect girls, young and elderly women from domestic violence and establish human rights for women. And we must address the following areas. That's what emerged in today's discussion: improve women's economic capacities, strengthen and expand training and sensitization program the way we used to have in during 1980s and 90s. We need to have such programs for the judiciary, for police, and for social work institutions, and for citizens as such. Third is a one-stop crisis center model, whether housed in hospital or in the community. That is also a very important mission, so that a woman survivor of violence doesn't have to run from pillar to post, and all the services converge to this one-stop crisis center. Effective use of media to build the public awareness. I think that has been emphasized by all of you. Programs designed for the batterer. I think that is one thing which now so many psychologists are talking about. Even the counselors are saying that, especially in the context of pandemic, that they are inundated with so many testimonies and complaints of domestic violence, that we need to have a systematic program for the batterers by the state and both the voluntary sector, in order to promote holistic approach to prevention as well as intervention, and for changing the mindset of people and changing the behavioral pattern of men, and to combat misogyny. Now, addressing domestic violence through education is very important. I think we can take from the message from recommendation of National Education Policy, which talks about the early childhood education. There also we must bring in the question of verbal, psychological, and physical violence, which, because the glorification of violent behavior, aggressive behavior among child is always gives the message, and children act out. So I think we need to start at a very young age. Thank you very much for such an enlightening discussion. And Advocate Shalu Nigam, you have really energized all of us to think in a multifaceted way to combat violence against women. And now I request IMPRI team to take over.
Thank you, Vibhuti ma'am. I'm Anchita Ghatak, a Senior Assistant Director at IMPRI, and on behalf of the IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center, I would like to formally thank all of you for joining us today for this web policy talk. We are grateful to our speaker, Dr. Shalu Nigam, for taking out the time to be with us and for delivering this very enriching and very informative talk on implementing domestic violence law in India. Are we asking the right questions? Thank you, ma'am. We are grateful to Professor Vibhuti Patel for joining us as the chair and for really guiding and steering today's set of deliberations. Thank you, ma'am. And of course, we are grateful to all our discussants, Professor Vishav Raksha, Ms. Anchita Ghatak, Professor Kanchan Mathur, and Ms. Gayatri Sharma for joining us today, sharing their insights and for raising some very thought-provoking questions and discussion points. Thank you. We are grateful to all our attendees who joined us here on Zoom or on Facebook Live and raised pertinent questions and very enthusiastically participated. And thank you to all who would be watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our podcast. We hope that you continue to tune in to future episodes of Gender Gaps as well as our other web policy talks. Thank you again and good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.